Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
in Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. Welcome back to episode 138 of the Freight 360 podcast. It's a great time of year because in Buffalo, we call this the go home Mother Nature, you're drunk time of year, because it was 82 degrees in Western New York the other day, and we got 2 inches of snow last night, so it's snowing outside. Can you believe that, man? End of April, and it's snowing here. I can, because I've lived here for like my whole life, so. No snow in Boca today, is there?
There is not. And I was talking with some friends in Pittsburgh, and they had said I think there were 3 sunny days in all of March they were talking about, and they were naming, I think it was the top 5 gloomier cities in the country. It was Seattle, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Chicago, and I can't remember the 5th one.
Yeah, I think Buffalo definitely is up there in the winter months. We lack that, is it vitamin D that you get from the sun?
It is.
Yeah. So, I don't know. But, hey, spring is, it's technically here, but summer's around the corner. But, yeah, we got the NFL draft coming up this weekend. If you're listening on Friday, the results of the first picks already came in last night. We record earlier in the week. So, before we get into sports, welcome back. Glad to have you. Share us with your friends. We're growing. I should say, too, if anybody is in our Facebook group and wants to be a moderator, let us know. But the rules for being a moderator, to be clear, you cannot promote yourself or your own. Can't be selling something that you have yourself, and no crap talking us or anything like that. So we ran into one of those issues recently with a moderator. So, but it's a big community now. 30-some thousand.
It is, and I'd further clarify. I think it was like 36,000 people we have in our Facebook group now, and like I don't necessarily think that we have any issues with somebody promoting what they do, but if it is competing with what we do, like selling brokerage and training classes, obviously that's a conflict of interest. But we have plenty of people that reach out to us on a weekly basis that want to get into the industry, want to get involved. This is a great way. We're looking for somebody to moderate our group, get people in, make sure they get rid of like spam posts.
You get multiple moderators in there. It's a big group now. So
it is.
Yeah.
And it's a great place to meet people, connect, network.
A lot of people will have like time sensitive posts, right? So they'll have like they want to find a load quickly as a driver, or they are looking for a carrier quickly to cover as a broker. And we need moderators because Facebook's admin assist, if you try to automate it and manually approve certain things, people's posts don't get in there right away. And we had at one point, we had 300 some people waiting to get a post up there. And it's just not, time's money. So, yeah.
That it is. So, hey, if anyone out there is interested, wants to get involved in the industry, wants to meet people, wants to network, it's a great way that you can do that, a few hours a week, and would appreciate the help. And we'll help you in whatever way we can.
Yep. All right, so today's episode is going to be on the market changing and, what some things to think about and consider. But I did want to do our sports recap. Here's your top 10 teams in the draft order. So first 10 picks. Round 1, you've got Jacksonville, Detroit, Houston, Jets, Giants, 2 New York teams in a row. Tells you how quality they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Panthers, Giants again. They must have traded, obviously, for that one. Falcons, Seahawks through a trade, and the Jets through a trade. So actually, the Jets and the Giants both have 2 top 10 picks. Bills are down there at 25th overall pick. Steelers at the 20th overall pick. Kansas City's got 2 late in the first round. Interesting. So the Rams must have, obviously the Rams traded theirs because they would have been 32, and they're not. They traded it to Detroit. That was probably part of the Stafford thing, if I'm going to guess correctly. But they got a Super Bowl ring out of it, so there you go. There's your And who cares? Because if you're listening to this and it's already released, this has already happened.
You already know.
You already know what happened in the first round. But anyway, that general order will continue throughout the weekend for all, I think it's 7 rounds. Yeah. As far as Bills, key players are already there. It's going to be beefing up, plugging some holes on the line and, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see what they do. Anything PGA-wise?
No, honestly. I don't even know if I'm sure there probably was a tournament last weekend.
There's like one
a big one. Yeah, not one that I noticed anyway.
Oh, so we did talk about that that like experimental spring football league. So they're like 2 weeks in and they have like terrible ratings. Go figure. Like
yeah.
I don't think that anybody's ever going to truly compete against the NFL. You know what I mean? That'd be like if you created a winter baseball league. Like baseball ends in the fall, and what are you going to start up a secondary league for the guys that weren't good enough? It's like if you did hockey, like a summer hockey league. I don't know.
I just find it a hard sell to make any other league other than like the preeminent ones. In any way, like I mean, the fun thing about going to farm league baseball games is that just like it's like an event and it's fun to just do, but it's not like you're going there to like watch baseball. You go there to have a few beers, eat some hot dogs, and take your family out for a cheaper evening than going to an MLB game.
So the way that I see it, because like you said, farm league baseball, right? It's hey, these are you get to go watch baseball. And if you are super, super into it, yeah, you might be able to go see some guys that may make it up to, major leagues. Or maybe you've got a major league player who got injured and they're gonna go back to the farm system to do some recovery. So I get the idea that they're like, oh, let's create like a farm league for football where these guys that aren't quite that good can play in. Well, that's college football. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of what it is because these guys coming out of college. Whereas like baseball, a lot of these guys, when they get drafted, they're not going to see the major leagues for years, right? They've got to really, really, really go through that farm system to get a starting spot on a roster. So that's my take on it. Okay. Well, let's get a shout out to our friends over at DAT, and then we'll get into today's topic.
Taking the guesswork out of freight with DAT. The DAT Load Board Network is the largest on-demand freight marketplace in North America, connecting freight brokers with available capacity on any lane. Grow your business with tools that allow you to find new business partners, and you can quickly qualify and onboard new carriers. With the industry's leading freight rate data, you can make clear and confident pricing decisions. Check out the show notes for a free month of DAT Power, Express, or Trucker's Edge.
All right, so changing market. We've all seen it. A lot of people were wondering, like, when is it going to shift, right? Because we thought in 2020 that it was like, just like we thought the pandemic, we're gonna lock down for a month or
2
so,
weeks.
and it's gonna flatten the curve, and then we get to the end of 2020 and. Things start to look a little better, and we ring in the new year with 2021, and it was still, the same. We're still on the same thing. And then we get to later in 2021, it got to the point where everyone's like, "Is this the new normal?" Like whether it's the pandemic or it's the freight market, everyone's like, "Are we ever going to catch up? Is demand ever going to be at a place with capacity and the amount of drivers and motor carriers out there that we can have a smooth supply chain that's not crazy?" But we have finally, after 2 years, we have finally seen the tides turn. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, right? Obviously, if the price of transportation goes down, you can see positives and you can see where it's negative for some, right? So positive, that will reflect a lot in the price you pay when you buy something, right? But again, we're talking macro level, the entire country. We're not talking specific lanes, specific commodities. Now, where is that bad? Well, if carriers are making less, it's less enticing for someone to want to drive a truck, right?
Also true.
So there's kind of a balance there. So we don't want to see rates hit rock bottom. We want to see a healthy level, and they are still on a national average higher than where they were 2 years ago. But they have come back to reality on a, again, domestically big picture macro level. Not everywhere. Some have taken a big hit, but overall they're coming back down.
And the reality is one, let's define what we're talking about, right? The shift in the market. The shift that we're talking about is it's costing less to book a truck right now than it did a day ago, a week ago, going all the way back to about the beginning of the year was when the decline started to happen, right? Yep. And some of that was held off a bit because of Omicron and people just being sick and there being a labor shortage. Even when the rates were coming down, there weren't enough people in the labor market for this to play itself out. Meaning that, like, even though rates could have come down faster, there were still a lot of people just not going to work because they were sick. So, you start to see this shift. And one is that's part of a healthy market. A healthy market, any market, is one where there is free trade, right? Unrestricted. So you're going to see it grow and shrink, right? Part of the industry is it needs to shrink. Otherwise, again, you end up in a scenario where you have just inflation, where everything is just moving in one direction. And again, we don't need to get into the economics of why this is occurring and all that. The reality is that one, you are seeing less loads in the market and you're seeing an increase in capacity because more people are driving, less people are sick. So you've got more trucks and you've got less loads, which means supply and demand. The trucks are becoming cheaper to book at a pretty alarming rate. I'm going to pull up this graph from...
I've got the 12-month stats here. I can go through equipment type if you want.
Yeah, run them off.
Let me give you, here you go, van. This is on a national level. We'll talk broker to carrier spot. 1 year ago, about $260 a mile. Now, $280 a mile. So still higher, but it peaked at over $3. Okay? Flatbed was at just under $3 a mile last year. Peaked up towards $350 and is now coming back down towards $340. So that flatbed we've seen the least change on. It's been more of van and reefer. Reefer was just under $3 a mile last year and still over, it's about $315 right now, but it was up towards $360 a few months ago. So we talked about the last couple of weeks. Van and reefer have had the most rebound thus far. Flatbed, not so much. What did you have on your stats there?
So, and what I was going to talk through a little bit was Michael Vincent over at FreightWaves. And one of the things that he had been posting, and they were graphs showing exactly what you just kind of walked through. But what they're also showing them is against what they call the tender rejection rate. The tender rejection rate is just out of any given, we'll say 100 loads that a shipper has, right? Of those 100 loads that are booked with carriers, how many of those loads are given back by their carrier? They are rejected. They had the load. They had gone through the bid process. They had committed that they were going to take these loads for that rate, we'll say for whatever period of time, a year. And when they went, that day came where they were going to go move that load or choose to take a load from the spot rate, right? The spot market. They decided they were going to go take one from the spot market, which means they rejected that one load, right? So the higher that percentage, the more loads a shipper has that were originally contracted to a carrier on an ongoing basis that now need to be covered in the spot market, meaning in the next 24 hours or in the next 36 hours or within the next week, right? Whatever that shorter time frame is, now they've got to go to the open market and book a load, right? That's the tender rejection rate. So what you see is as rates start to fall in the spot market, the tender rejection rate that hit a historic high, I think of 33% is right around where it hung through most of the pandemic.
That's insane.
When loads, when you can't get, it's opportunity cost, right? If I have contracted for a load at $2.40 a mile, but I can go to the spot market today and get paid $3 a mile, I don't have any incentive to follow through with the commitment I made on that bid 8 months ago, a year ago, yesterday. Doesn't matter. If I can go make more money today by just calling up any broker on the spot board and get paid more, I'm not going to take that load from the shipper that I agreed to. And that's why you see when the spot market exceeds the contract market, that the tender rejection rate goes up. Because if I could just go into the day labor market and get paid more than my employer was, why would I go to work at my employer? I'm making more money on a daily basis going into the job market and seeing what anybody's willing to pay me today, right?
And it's interesting you say that. It's almost like we saw the Great Resignation. People were jumping from company to company every 4 to 5, 6 months over the last couple of years because they were going to get offered a sign-on bonus or this higher pay. And then they get there and they quickly realize, maybe the grass isn't greener on this side. It's a little bit different in employment versus, carrier capacity, but opportunity cost. That's what it comes down to. Hey, if I stay at this job, for another 20 years, I might be giving up the opportunity to go, make more money over here or get this awesome job or position that I've been wanting, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. But it was kind of a phenomenon that we haven't seen in the labor market for a very, very long time. And that's also correlated over to the carrier side with capacity as well. So
more
what does that mean for us? Or what else, what else we got on this side? Then I want to talk about what does it mean for us.
Let's go through this a little bit more. So what you have is, right, the contract market, right, pre-pandemic is where the majority of the freight is booked. Like if a company knows shipments are on their schedule, they have sales they've already made, they need to deliver these products, they typically go to the asset market when they know what they've got to ship because, again, it's more predictable. They know the asset companies can plan for it, and that's a good fit for that type of transportation company. What happened was once rates in the spot market started to rise, meaning people needed product faster, companies had a harder time getting inventory, which means now they need to ship things in a shorter time frame, right? What that does is it drives up rates in the spot market. Again, because companies were finding out unexpectedly through the pandemic, because nobody knew what to expect, that they needed things and a lot more of them shipped a lot faster than they had planned for. So again, what does that load planner do? That means they're calling their broker and they're saying, hey, I got 5 loads that need to go out today. We just find out about. Hey, I've got another 10 loads tomorrow. More moves shift from asset companies to the spot market. Those rates are going up, right? Because the shippers need to get that stuff out.
Yeah, that's your
customers
demand
are like,
right there.
yeah, the demand, all of us in this country that needed things are like, look, we need this, we need this, we need this. And they're paying more and more to get it there. It's driving up spot rates, right? So what happens is more and more of those contract loads end up in the spot market. Why? Go back to the carriers. The carriers look at the load boards every day. They bid and they planned to take all these loads for whatever shipper they agreed to that year, right? But the reality was, as spot market rates went up, the carriers started rejecting more loads. They went,
You see that dangling carrot over there on the load boards.
Yes.
Yeah?
Unintentionally.
How much? Yeah.
I'm going to get $3.50, $4 a mile, $5 a mile if I really hold out, and I've agreed to $2.20 a mile. I can have rocks in my head if I'm going to go pick this load up for what I agreed to, right? And again, in our industry, if you don't pick up a load, the only penalty is really the customer might not work with you again. But in a market where everybody needs what they can't get, which is a carrier at that time, that's still pushing upward pressure on the spot rates. So less and less carriers were even willing to go into a bid at all. One, because they don't know where the rates are going, and two, it's still more advantageous to go pick a load up today than to agree to some, bid on a long-term basis. So you have this migration of loads from the carrier contract market into the spot market, which is really what's been happening over the past 2 or 3 years, is just tons of loads hitting the spot market because shippers haven't been able to contract with carriers, right?
So let's talk about what does this mean for us. Now, we talked about how a lot of carriers right now are wanting to contract, right? They want to get away from that spot market because
why?
The bottom's falling out.
Exactly.
Right?
It's an elevator. It's in a free fall, right? They're like, oh, it was $2.35 yesterday. It's $2.30 today. It was $2.50 last week. It's going down and down and down every day. So the carriers are like, wait a minute, before it goes any lower, we better jump on and call some of these shippers we know and just lock it in before it falls any lower, right?
Yep.
The shippers, though, on the other hand, are like, well, we're so scared that rates are going to go up again that we want to take what we can get while we can get it. So now you're seeing the opposite, where spot
There's also
carriers.
another thought in their head too, right? There's well, we want to take advantage of the low rates while we can get them, but at the same time, they're also like, well, one out of every three loads was getting sent back to me the last couple years. So why am I going to trust this contract now, especially when rates are lower, not under the contract side of it? So it's
Yeah.
kind of a two-headed spear there.
Absolutely, and that's the other side of that risk, right? Like because there's really no repercussions to contracts in our industry. Like there's not like a penalty. You're not going to get sued if you don't pick the loads up that you said you were going to in the bid. Like you just lose the relationship. So
Yep.
again, these markets flow a lot more freely than other markets where you see like heavy contracts that have penalties. So again, like it's a good thing that the market shifts because it keeps things at an equilibrium. And again, it prevents things that you were mentioning earlier, inflation, like ridiculous transportation costs that gets rolled into our goods that eventually we can't pay for because they become too expensive, right?
Yep. So, and I mean, if you look at, there's kind of been an inverse relationship in spot rates the last 2 months, and fuel rates the last 2 months. So, and it's, had spot rates continued to climb and fuel continues to climb, that's double trouble right there. So at least we're seeing one go down while the other goes up. Overall, the fuel is the smaller portion of that cost altogether, so it's still beneficial. Now, I want to talk about what does it mean for you in the freight brokerage position. So I talked to a guy on Monday, so of this week. I want to say about 6 to 9 months ago, he had, I think there was one main carrier that he was using for 2 lanes a week, and he ended up having to go to the spot market about 6 to 9 months ago for those lanes to cover them because his carrier stopped being there for him. Basically said, I love working with you, but I can't just pass up this freight that's paying almost twice as much out there in the free market right now. I know we've been doing this and they're good lanes, they get me where I want to go, but for a season
Money.
I'm going to go out there and hustle and make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But now things have the tables have turned here. This is when you can re-engage those conversations. If you're that broker or if you're that carrier sales rep that your go-to carriers all of a sudden ghosted you in the last year or whatnot because the spot market went absolutely bonkers, don't forget who those people were, right? Chances are they probably still want to go in the same direction that they were before. They're probably still sleeping on the weekends or when they do their reset time at the same location, or their trucks going to the same terminal, or whatever the case might be. This is a great time to take advantage of that and try to re-engage those conversations. And remember, consistency is another thing that carriers look for outside of just what is it going to pay, right? Hey, if I can do this every single week, or I can do 2 of these every single week, right? They don't have to worry about where am I going 3 days from now. So think about that stuff.
Absolutely. And some other things, actionable things that you're likely seeing in your book, right? So again, you're probably seeing your lanes blow up a lot more, meaning your phones. You're getting a lot more phone calls on the posts you have, right? Which is a great thing. And as soon as this transition happens, this flip in the market, usually that's the first thing you see. You go from getting a couple calls trickling in on a post to like 20, 30, 40, right? Everything seems easy to cover. But also, very quickly after that, your shipper starts to realize the same things, right? Because again, they're going to have their carriers that did exactly what you just said to you guys as brokers. The ones that were shipping for you guys regularly also ship for shippers regularly too. Now they're calling them back and going, hey, those lanes I ran for you in like 19 and 18 and 17, would like to get back on the board with those. You still need some help with those. And they're willing to take them for a predictable rate. So what you'll see very quickly after your loads become easy to cover is the quantity of loads being offered to you from your customers usually starts to diminish a little bit. It starts to shrink. Because again, the carriers are going directly back to the shippers and saying, hey, I know I've left you high and dry, but here I'm back. All's forgiven. What can we do to make this better, right?
Yep. So we talked about this I want to say when we had Ken Adamo on in 2020. And we've talked about it all throughout last year as well. So in the market that we are just coming out of, you can get any customer on the phone because they're all having issues for the most part, right? The hard part was how to secure a truck. And now as we shift back, and now it may be easier to secure a truck, but now you've got to turn up the notch on your customer relationship and how to build those relationships, right? How to build rapport, be reliable, and not just be, oh, I can get you a cheap truck, because it's always more than that. But this is a time to really leverage your, like, as the price shifts downward in the spot market, use this time before it's at its new normal level. Communicate with your customers, educate them on what's happening in the market, do something that the average broker is not doing for them, right? Give them that kind of insight on the macro level that they're not getting from, John Doe over at TQL or CH Robinson, right? You want to use every possible opportunity to build rapport. And at the same time, right, the carriers that you've built relationships with in the last couple of years as well, don't forget about them, right? Yep. Sometimes you got to pay a carrier a little bit of extra money, right? And show them how much you appreciate them being the one that's going to be there to take care of your customer for you. So, because you see a lot of brokers where their thought process is, man, I can't wait for the market to flip. I'm going to screw carriers left and right now that, the ball's in my court. Well, don't forget, at some point, probably a year to 2 years from now, there'll be another shift, because it always happens. It's cyclical, and you're going to need to rely on those carrier relationships a lot more, once again. So,
well, that's what I think.
Just treat everybody with respect.
Because, and that's the thing that, like, as humans, we're not very good at, right? We think that when the market shifts, everything else is going to stay the same except that one variable, the carriers, right? The reality is when the market shifts, all of it shifts. The demand, the amount, the quantity, how the shippers act, what's happening in the environment, all of it does. So yeah, in a perfect world, if your shipper had the same problems and it was easier to book a carrier, yes, you would be able to execute that strategy of, I'm just going to beat carriers up and keep all the money. The reality is that same thing is happening to the shippers. It's getting easier for them the same way it's getting easier for you, right? And I remember one of my boss had said that to me the first time I said that out loud. I was in a super tight market when I started, and I'm like, oh my Lord, this job would be so easy. I can't wait for the market to flip. And I'll never forget, he just kind of chuckled and went, careful what you ask for. Later, a couple years later, I saw the other side of it, and a drastic example when they had the ELDs, and you're like, oh, now I get what you mean, right? Like, because we don't just get one aspect to get better. All of it changes, all of the context and everything around you, right? So again, actionable stuff. What does that mean for you as a broker, and how do you take advantage of this, right? One, right now, this is one of the few times where the market shifts. There's a brief period of time of weeks, sometimes if you're lucky, a month, a little more than a month, where the spot market remains cheaper than the contract market, which is where we're at right now, which means every time you've ever taken a quote back to any prospect or any customer, and they've always told you you're too high, this is the one time in the market where they are actually paying more for their contracted freight than what it would cost you and maybe your margin to get a truck in the spot market. So you actually have a discount to your advantage right now.
Yeah, and this is one of those times when if you use this 4 to 6, whatever it could be, because I think it's been about 6 weeks where that's been the case. And I don't know that the rates have kind of come back any closer to each other, so it might be a little bit of longer of a period this time. But this is when you can use that opportunity, when you can get your customer not just good service, but you can also give them a really, really competitive price compared to what they're used to paying on the contract side. Use this as an opportunity to really build their trust and gain their confidence, okay? Some of you will never succeed at doing that, and that's, it just is what it is. We're not all cut out to be in the freight brokerage world. There has been a lot of folks that have joined into it the last couple of years. But those of you that really want to go the extra mile, give your customer some insight. Hey, here's the deal. Here's why I'm able to offer you more competitive prices right now. And keep in mind, I won't always be the cheapest, but I'm able to be cheaper than your go-to option right now. But again, it's not going to happen forever. But I'm also not going to hide that from you. I'm going to still give you a very, very fair price here. And that'll give you a lot of credibility.
And here's
again, we're talking on national averages. There's probably someone out there listening being like, well, that's not happening in this lane. Yeah. And that's, you're right. We're talking national averages here.
So to 2 points. One, the strategies that most of the bigger brokerages use, and again, like we're in an atypical scenario, right? This hasn't happened for over 2 years. Normally this happens every year, right? So most brokerages are used to expecting, predicting the flip in the market, the change. It usually happens with produce every year. It happens with the peaks, and it happens through the holidays. Like there's certain things that just cyclically happen every year, that this is a normal occurrence. We have not seen this for a few years, which makes it more impactful, or just seem like it's just out of the ordinary. But normally it isn't, right? What are the big companies?
It's been over 2 years, that's for sure.
Yeah,
and we saw an entire market cycle in about, like, I don't know, the beginning of the pandemic. We saw the entire thing shift and then shift back.
Yes, in like a matter of like 60 days. So the actionable thing that I think you can take away from all this is what the bigger companies preach to their brokers is when this market flips, you move from trying to maximize your margin on a per load basis to maximizing your load count volume, right? In fact, they'll even go so far as that, like when you're sitting down with your manager, they're not even evaluating your margin percentage right now. They just care how many loads can you get booked with every one of your prospects and customers. And why is that? They do that because, again, it's a strategy. Get yourself in while you have an advantage. The advantage is you've got cheaper access to trucks in the spot market. Use that to your advantage. Dig your feet in as far as you can with every one of the companies you're working with or talking to. Why? So that you can show every one of them that you excel in everything that Nate just pointed out. You've got better service, better communication. Your trucks are on time. When things go wrong, you stand up for it. You give bad news early. You give it often when it's necessary, right? You do all the things that you know stand apart so that, again, when the inevitable happens, what we're going to talk about in a second, when the market shifts back, you have used this as an opportunity to ingrain and really just build yourself into this organization to where, like, they see this, they understand the value, because when it shifts and the spot market goes back up and they start needing help, then we shift back to some higher margin spot loads while keeping this in place. Yeah, it's not super high margin freight. Maybe it's 9-10%. But again, it's giving you the opportunity to build a lasting relationship that is going to make you a lot more money as soon as the market comes around this other turn.
Yep, and one thing I want to add on here before we move on to the next part here is a lot of the things you just said on things to do, it doesn't matter if the market's changing or what time of the year it is. There are just fundamental practices that you should be incorporating into your day-by-day job in the freight brokerage world, and that is be a good communicator, be honest, be transparent. Treat your customers and carriers both with respect and like your job depends on it, because it does. When problems arise, stand behind your customer if you know your customer is right. Stand behind your carrier if you know that they are right and they're not in the wrong. Give that bad news as early as you know it and give those updates as often as you possibly can, because it's going to save you trouble and headaches down the road. Whether it's a soft market or whether the capacity is tight or capacity is loose, whatever, you should still be making all your prospecting calls every single week, right? That should not change. It's just the approach of that call and the conversations you'll be having are going to be different, but still block out that time for prospecting, right? Every time you talk to a carrier, whether or not they take a load, get some more information out of that carrier. Hey, where do you normally have trucks available? What kind of equipment do you have? Where do your drivers like to go? Etc.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what the market's doing. Those fundamentals will always remain the same. So,
hey,
what else
which,
you got on the market fluctuation before we hop into the Q&A here?
You were asking about when this is going to shift. And actually, there was a post from Michael Vincent at FreightWaves that it's really close to doing it as of today.
Okay.
It didn't necessarily cross, but rejections and contract loads have continued a rapid descent, putting more pressure on truckload rates. He said he'd pointed out previously that the impending collision of spot rates and contract rates was narrowly avoided. So it came close, but it hasn't, and that's what they're talking about, right? When you look at a graph, the contract rates and where the spot rates are. Spots are going down, contracts going up, and where they're actually going to meet. But it's inevitable at some point because, again, the risk and the economics don't make sense. it should not be cheaper to do something today than if I planned for it 3 days ago or a week ago, right?
Think
That
about
is
if
an
you're buying an
anomaly.
airline ticket, right?
Yes.
Should it be cheaper if I wanted to buy a round trip airfare to Hawaii today or tomorrow versus, oh, I bought it 3 months ago, right? It should be more expensive
Yep.
today. But yeah, that's how it was when COVID first started. Remember? Airline prices all of a sudden dropped because, people weren't flying. But that's kind of that rare entity right there. So good stuff. All right, I'm going to give a shout out to our friends over at Lean Solutions Group. It's Q2, and our focus this quarter is on the labor shortage. We're going to do an episode with Lean in the next couple of months here. But make sure if you have staffing needs, whether that's back office employees, operations folks, account managers, maybe you need some marketing help, maybe you need some tech support folks, like anything in that realm. Check out Lean Solutions Group. They've got the marketing, the tech side, the sales side, and the staffing side. So leangroup.com, that's your link to go to. There's always a link in the show notes or on the affiliate section of our website. So we got 2 questions today. First one of our listeners wrote into us and asked about insurance. They said, what insurance do I need as a broker if a driver hauling one of my loads gets into an accident that they are at fault for and injures another driver? So broker gives a load to a carrier gets in an accident, and someone's injured. It doesn't change the insurance that you need. So the motor carrier is required to have a certain set of insurance or a certain set of insurance coverages to protect incidents like that, right? They have cargo insurance to cover their cargo. They have liability insurance to cover accidents and injuries, right? As a broker, you don't have possession of that freight. You can't control what that driver does. They're not employed by you. They're contracted. It's very legally separated. And for that reason, you don't have a policy that would cover that driver getting in an accident. Nor do you want to have to cover yourself for something that you don't have control over, right?
Yeah.
Simple
Or
as that.
can you, by the way? Like, literally aren't able to insure for that.
Exactly. That was kind of the big thing remember with like Uber and Lyft a couple of years ago. They were like, well, who's going to get sued if someone gets hurt in an accident when they're riding in an Uber or a Lyft? And it's like, Uber's like, well, we're not the one driving it, so why should we have an insurance policy that pays for the rider? It's like, so it's a lot more straightforward in transportation.
I was in a car accident in an Uber, and it did play out that way. Like, it literally went on to the driver's insurance and then Uber's umbrella policy, very similar to what would happen with a
So I
car.
think that's what ended up happening with Uber is they ended up having to get some kind of policy for that.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it crazy? Uber is like the largest the largest personnel transportation company, and they don't own a single car. Wow.
Yes, it's impressive.
So, all right. But hey, broker insurance, we've covered it in a lot of our other stuff. You don't need liability, but a lot of folks will have general liability. You can have contingent cargo, contingent auto, workers' comp.
To be honest,
you can do depending on your business.
Yeah, and to be honest, most brokerages have both not because they're required to, but because the shippers require it. Your customers are going to ask and require it. So,
all right, our second question. We only have 2 today. This came from our Facebook group, and this is great. It kind of goes in line with what we just talked about with the market shifting. So, Carrier wrote in our group, they basically saw a load posted from a broker on the load boards with a price like a pay or like either a book it now price or just a rate listed, and said, why would another carrier book this load at a cheaper rate than that broker had it posted for? So I think the broker had it posted for $900, and they went to call in to book it for $900, and the broker's like, oh, someone else just took it for $800. And they're like, well, why would they take it for less than it was posted for? Well, as we just saw with the supply demand right now, because the amount of carriers in the spot market available to haul the loads that are there, the competition has gone up for carriers, which drives the price down. So a carrier says, well, if that's posted for $900, I don't want to be one of 10 people calling in on it. I'm going to call in an offer to take it for $800 because I need to go where that load's taking me.
There you
that
go.
load's going.
Direction.
I'll take it for less.
Yeah, ding, ding, ding. What we talk about all the time. It's always rate or direction. They needed to get there. That load matched up perfectly, and they were willing to take a discount so that they could get there for the next shipment they had planned. Somewhere close to it, I would assume.
Yep. That's it. So there's your market insight and market analysis for late April 2022. Crazy stuff.
Here's the thing. I think my biggest takeaway on this is people always ask, which market would you prefer to work in? The reality is I don't care which one exists. I just care that they're shifting, because when markets shift, they create opportunities, and we're in the middle. So when one side's harder, the other side's easier. When that side's harder, that side's easier. There is no perfect world other than this brief period of time right now where you've got this opportunity. But the reality is like, that's why these markets are my favorites to work in, because when things shift, the carriers are scrambling to call shippers or they're falling out on brokers. It just creates a lot of opportunity because, again, the future is just more uncertain than it was even before, right? Nobody really knows what they should be doing on a daily basis, which gives you a ton of opportunities with your prospects, your customers, and your carriers. Like you pointed out, reaching out to carriers you haven't worked with since 19 because they were chasing that high dollar in the spot market. Now's a great time to bring them back into the fold.
So think about there's a certain percentage of I would say it's not the majority, it's the minority of carriers, and the same goes with the minority of brokers, that they hate each other, right? There's a certain small percentage of brokers that swear that carriers are scummy, and the same small percentage of carriers that say brokers are thieves, right? Think about this. Outside of those people who they probably don't understand why they're saying what they're saying, when the market shifts and all these things change, that is the reason that a broker can come and add value to both parties, both their shipper and that motor carrier, right? A shipper, right? Say you work at a manufacturing plant, you're a logistics coordinator, it's your job to make sure trucks get in here and pick up our shipments. If you don't have the market insight to know what's happening around the country, in other areas of the country, other markets, other equipment types, other commodities, if you don't know that, you're going to have a really hard time trying to figure out why you can't get trucks in there at the price you're asking for. That's where a broker can come and offer you a couple things, right? Some insight and information to educate you, but also they can present you multiple options. So if you got 3 options to the market and they're all higher than what you were expecting to pay, well, chances are you just learned that the market's costing a lot more than you thought it was, right? That's what brokers do. Whereas if you just randomly call a couple of carriers, they're not going to all have the same experiences. Brokers bring together a myriad of knowledge and information from all across the market. At least that's what we should be doing. There's some bad eggs out there, and there's some bad eggs with carriers out there. There's some bad eggs with shippers out there that are dishonest. I mean, it is what it is. But this is where we add true value. There's a lot of carriers out there that have brokerage divisions for this reason. They know there's opportunity. They know they can add value. Hey, maybe we're strong suited for a customer on our asset side. And maybe in other circumstances, our brokerage or our logistics division is going to be more beneficial to that customer. So there's your Nate Cross's wisdom for the day.
And there's a lot of good takeaways in there too, right? I mean, they are the foundations of success in this industry, right? Doing all of these things on a consistent basis is the recipe for success. It's not easy, but it is simple. It's not necessarily complicated, right? Be ethical, be upfront, do the things other people aren't willing to, and do them over and over again.
That's it. Good stuff. Good episode. What's the latest in the Ukrainian Guardian Angel Fund? Any updates? I know I saw some pictures on Facebook of more deliveries and all that.
Yeah, some of your donations. They bought some stuff this week. My wife's been talking to just a lot of the refugees on a daily basis. I mean, it's weird to say, but like, I am surprised at kind of how well and just like uplifted their spirits are. And again, like, I'm talking to a very small group just in Poland that we work with, on a daily basis, but I mean, like, they're just finding great ways to keep the kids busy so that they're not worried and thinking about this. I mean, none of the kids have their dads. They literally weren't able to leave, so they're literally just women and children. But I mean, taking them to go play soccer, taking them hiking, just getting them into school, and just doing things that I think, honestly, like, we kind of take for granted in normal society, but is just really awesome to see some of those things happening over there. And like you saw, some of the pictures of the kids just smiling, happy, looking like children, being able to enjoy some semblance of their childhood, even though these horrible things are happening, just miles up the road. So, I mean, if you haven't donated, all greatly appreciated. It's all going to a great cause, going directly to the refugees in Poland and on the borders. And any help's, going to go to the right place.
Yeah, definitely. I got a link in the show notes there. I missed it in the news, or the sports and news part. Twitter, man. Elon Musk, his bid was accepted by Twitter.
Million,
we might have to get on Twitter, Ben. We don't have a Twitter presence.
We don't. I have 2 accounts. I've never really been able to get engaged in it. Like, I know that lots of people like follow it and watch it. I don't know. It's just never really done it for me.
I go to Twitter for my breaking news. Like, because chances are somebody has tweeted about something before someone's had a chance to write an article. Yes. But, I mean, you get a lot of, like, blended, I want to say it's like blended misinformation. Like, you'll find, like, as soon as a story's breaking, you get different, like, conflicting reports on it. You know what I mean? So, like, a lot of times I remember I was sitting in traffic in Hawaii with my wife, like, 3 or 4 years ago on our honeymoon, and I was like, why are we stuck on this 2-lane highway in Maui? So I went to Twitter and I saw, like, police whoever EMS tweeted, like, there's a rollover accident on this road. I'm like, well, there you go, right? Got my news from Twitter.
It does. It provides a lot of value. I mean, I was watching it, honestly, a lot of it was during the war. I was pulling up Twitter to just see what people were reporting from the ground. I mean, it's definitely useful. I don't know. I just don't get that necessarily engaged in social media. It's just kind of not my thing.
I gotcha. Fair enough. So, who knows? Maybe we'll have a little a Twitter account. Probably not, because I don't know. I'm like you, man. I don't. Social media, I use it as its necessity, and I very, very rarely post anything myself.
Yeah, maybe we can pay someone to just do it for us, and we'll tell them what we want to share.
So, in addition to a moderator for Facebook, if anyone's a pro on Twitter
and wants to manage a Twitter account, we'll give you the content, and you guys can moderate it,
run with it, or fly with it, tweet with it. All right, any closing thoughts or proverbs?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, with the draft this weekend, let's go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.